Let's start with our class with Block 5, Contemporary Perspectives, in which we will study four of the approaches, that is the New Public Management approach, Good Governance approach, Postmodern approach, and Feminist approach. These four approaches are there in Block 5, which is the Contemporary Perspective. We'll now go through by the New Public Management approach. Now, public administration has undergone a substantial transformation in the political, social, economic, and cultural spheres across the world. Factors including the development of information technology, telecommunication, computing, liberalization of trade, deregulation of financial and banking system, growth of transnational cooperation, and so on, has given an influence of globalization. Now, globalization is affecting the public administration system as it is embedded in the framework of the state. The pressure exerted by global institutes are also immense. Globalization is pushing the state towards adherence of global standards and behavior. On the other hand, a new paradigm called the new public management, or we can say NPA, has emerged as a result of the structural adjustment programmed by the UK and the US to make their administration efficient and effective. Simultaneously, on the other hand, the internal and social political pressures are tempting to assert that the role of the state and its power in the protecting the interest of the governed need to be safeguarded. Now, this unit will try to explain the changing role of state and public administration in the globalization context. It will examine the genuine of NPA as a new administrative model and also critically evaluate its relevance and characteristics. Now, what are the changing role of the state and evolution of new public management, that is NPA? The changing complexion of the state also brought a new structure and features. A pro-market and anti-state philosophy of private good and public bad came to prevalent during 1980 and 1990s in the UK and USA. It saw the rise of new central actor in the form of new public management, that is NPA. The influence of new right philosophy, new institutional economics, and public choice approach on NPA has been evident. Public administration, traditionally speaking, has always had a major obligations towards promoting public interest, assuring equity, representativeness, and responsiveness to the citizen. Thus, its excessive reliance on the bureaucracy, hierarchy, rule, and regulations in the course of time put a question mark on its efficiency and effectiveness. Thus, the orthodox public administration has found a new reform replaced in the form of NPA. The complexity and intercurrency of the traditional model of administration have paved the way for a new thinking that focuses on the present changing scenario, which needs government reforms. It also focuses on the public organization that needs to undergo a change in the mindsets from mere execution of tasks to performance orientations. The need for risk taking, mission orientations, and service orientations in public organizations. These were the focuses of the NPA. NPA has thus emerged as a major manifestation of competition state, a new paradigm which gained wider usage with varied label invention, re-engineering, quality management, and performance management. Focuses basically on changes in the structure and processes of government. The new philosophy and the new rights which came about had the impact of new right philosophy. The new right idea of restricting the scope of government work propagated because the government was considering an ineffective mechanism to realize the goal of welfareism. Frederick Herrick and Robert Nozick rejected the basic idea of government intervention in the economy. The group of influential new liberal economic criticized big government and was of the opinion that only few markets could put together the encouragement elements in a society. The public choice theory, that is PTC, propagated such as Ronan Tupper, James Garner, and Patrick Donald assumed prominence their prepositions on the reduction of government and bureaucracy. Reliance on market structure with flexible structures and incentive reduces the role of public sector and restricted it to the provision of bare minimum functions. This gave a theoretical foundation to the bureaucrat, basing reduction of government activities and designing market-based public policy. Let us now look at the approach under new right philosophy, which was the impact of MPA. The one was first was the public choice approach that was under the new right philosophy. First public choice approach. The basic premises of public choice approach or theory (PTC) is that the individuals are utilized, maximized, and were politically are vote maximizer and bureaucratic are self-aggrandized and hence maximize budgets. We have already discussed in theory or in brief. We have gone through public choice approach in our previous blog, that is blog 4. We'll just go through briefly. The government tends to function not in the interest of public as it expands to meet the references, interest of politicians, bureaucrats, and other interests. Though PTC assumes individual as equalist. PTC is the public choice approach. Individual as ecologist, self-regardation, and those who seek maximum possible benefits for personal gains from the decision they take into evolution of least cost. The choice of decision to a great extent depends on the consequences ensuring from the decisions. Public choice theorists have made the assumption that individuals who could be voters, politicians, bureaucrats, lobbyists, and guided by self-interest are there in the public choice are being engaged of the public choice approach. Second was the principal agent approach. The principal agent approach attempts to understand the dynamic of the relationship between the principal and the employee or the agent. The agent is said not to act in the best interest of the principal, especially in the situation where the employee has the advantage of possessing information and has diverse interests from the principal. The approach is based on the premises that there are two persons involved in provisions of a service and they are not on an equal standing in legal terms. The party who is engaging the other is called the principal and the party that is getting engaged is called the agent. These two are involved in the provisions of service that are but are not equal standing in legal terms. Third is the transaction cost approach. Now, this application of transaction cost approach framework enables the government to minimize problems arising out of contracting or contracting. It helps in choosing the contractors, contract design, and specifications determining the quantity or quality of services. NPA attempts to emphasize efficiency and uses contracts as important institutions variants in public service delivery. These models help in assessing the efficiency of use of alternate institutions arrangements, comprehending the inherent dilemma and intention of involving the contractual relationship, and balancing the efficiency and accountability aspects of contracts. That was the transaction cost of approach. The conceptual framework of NPS. What was the framework of NPS? The conceptual framework of NPS, that is the doctrine down by Christopher Wood 1991 and labeled the various as managerial market-based approach to public administration. Post-bureaucratic paradigm is marked by certain distinct features. From these work, we can reduce the following distinct characteristics of NPA. The basic characteristics of NPAs would be complementing managerial along with policy making skills, then adopting private sector managerial practices by the public sector, setting explicit measurements, performance standard for public organizations, controlling the performance of public organization by predetermined output pressures, contracting out private ownerships and competitions in the public service provisions, making services more responsive to the needs of the customer and ensuring value for money, using information technology to facilitate better service delivery, and focusing on achieving results rather than primarily conforming with processes. Making public administration customer driven will enhance service ethic and efficiency. Deregulation and government activities to make it result oriented. Making public administration custom driven is to enhance public services and ethic of efficiency. Now, deregulation the government activities to make the result oriented and empowering the employees to serve the customer as it promotes teamwork. Now, these teamworks could be overall public administration's culture, to changing all the over public administration culture towards flexibility, innovation, entrepreneurship, enterprising, as opposing to rule-bound, process orientation, and focusing on inputs rather than results. Now, these were the basic characteristics of NPS, in which basic stress was there to make the policy skills in public sectors and organizing performance standards, controlling the performance of public organizations by predetermined output measures, and also using information technologies to facilitate better service delivery and focusing on achieving results rather than primarily conforming with processes. These were the basic characteristics of NPA. While changing the overall public administration culture towards flexibility, innovation, entrepreneurship, enterprising as a closure of rule bound, process orientation, and focusing on inputs rather than results, while public administration is based much more on political science and law, NPA draws heavily on economics and business administration. The NPA is that form of strategy encompassing a series of methods and technologies that aim at government reforms. So basically, the NPA and NPM is the its aim is to reform government. Now, reinventing government, the transformation of governmental system receiving a new turn in 1992 with the propagations of the concepts of reinventing government by David Ostrom and Ted Kepler. In their work in Relevantary Government or Reinventing Government, how the entrepreneur spirit is transforming the public sector, they made an elaborate case for transforming the bureaucrats' government into an entrepreneurial one. The enterprising government that they practice or prescribe is not so much concerned with that the government does, but how it does, they emphasize that. Emphasis first they made was the first what emphasis emphasized in the relevant of the government was the government cannot simply be like a business because government and business serve different purposes. Both of them value and necessarily are different. Second is that the question is not how much government we have, but what kind of government we have. Hence, they made a case of government undergoing a change of inventing itself. The model by conceptualizations had the following 10 forms, and that is one was the critical government, community oriented government, competitive government, mission driven government, result oriented government, custom driven government. Seventh was the enterprising government, anticipatory government, decentralized government, and tenth was the market oriented government. Now, catalytic, the first form of government, that is the catalytic government, providing not only services but also capitalize all sectors into actions in the solution of problems. That is the first form of government. Then second form was the community-oriented government, which emphasizes or empowering of the citizens in service delivery. This basically deals with the empowering of citizens in service delivery. That is the community-oriented government. Third form of government was the competitive government, that is promoting competitions among various service providers. Fourth is the mission driven government, in which being driven by the missions and not rules and regulations. Our mission is the basic need of the mission driven government. Fifth, the form of government was the result oriented government, in which measuring their performance of organizations on the basis of their outcome rather than inputs. Sixth was the custom driven government, in which defining clients as customers and offering them choice in service delivery. That is the custom driven government. Seventh is the enterprising government, in which mobilizing efforts towards earning money instead of just spending is enterprising government. Eight is the anticipatory government, being proactive in the sense of preventing problems before they emerge. That is the anticipatory government. It provokes and is the proactive sense in which to prevent problems which arise before. Ninth is the centralized government, in which sorting of decentralizations and authority with a view of taking decision making close to the citizens only. That is the decentralized government. Tenth is the market oriented government. Market oriented government rely on market mechanisms in the provisions of services rather than bureaucrat mechanisms. Osborne and Grabler consider that these fundamental changes are necessary by crisis situations or crisis in situations which requires people with vision, leadership, qualities and support of business, government well as the societal organizations. These were the 10 government forms in which new public administration was formed. What was the impact of NPA reforms? These reforms which was made in the new public administration approach. What was the impact of these reforms? NPM attempts to create a new entrepreneurial and user-oriented culture in public organizations, which emphasizes on performance, measurement, and autonomy of to organizations and individuals. MPM as a very political dimension, which has given rise to certain implications such as clash of values between traditional and new public administration, contradictory nature of factors underlying reinvention of government, and or the nature of factors underlying the reinventing government. Then managerial predominance over policy capacities, reinforcement of politics administration doctrine, and absence of clear-cut concepts of accountability, rendering citizens as customers, providing only managerial solutions to public sector problems. These were the certain implications in the impact of MPA reforms, in which there were clashes between the public administration and the traditional forms, and contradictory to the nature of factors underlying the invention of the reinventing government. There managerial predominance over the policy capacities were there, and absence of clear-cut concept of accountability. In India, the public management reforms which were introduced as part of structural adjustment program, or SPA as we can say, adjustment programs, assume several forms such as liberalization, deregulations, privatizations, and disinvestments. The changes had to be introduced in financial, banking, and regulatory sectors, and the economy had to be opened up to the market focus. Now, in the other parts which we conclude of the NPS, we need to look beyond new public management reforms in order to strive towards blending of economic and social values. Evolving and adapting a new administrative reforms, it is necessary that each country examines its flexibility as per clearly formulated reforms objectives. Examine suitable prerequisites and reforms and create a conducive atmosphere for its implementations. That was the new public administration approach. We will just quickly go through what we have studied in the new public management approach, that is the NPM. The changes, first we had gone through that the changing role of the state and evolution of new public management, how it evolved, NPA, how the new management approach was evolved. It evolved basically on the public administration, traditionally speaking, as major obligations towards promoting public interest, assuring equity, representativeness, and responsiveness to the citizen. That it is the excessive reliance on the bureaucracy, hierarchy, rule, and regulation. That was the basic changes that came across the state of the evolution of new public management. The new public management, the complexities and interplay of traditional model of public administration have paved the way for a new thinking that focuses basically on the present changing scenario, which needs government reforms and which also focuses on the public organization that needs to undergo a change in mindsets from their execution of tasks to the performance orientation. Third focuses on next was the focus was there to the need for risk taking, mission orientations, and service orientations in public outreach. MPM has thus emerged as a major manifestation of competition states. This new paradigm, which gained wider usages with varied labeled inventions, re-engineering, quality management, and performance management, focuses basically on changes in the structure and processes of the government. That was the basic role of the state and evolution of new public management. Now, impact the what was the impact of the philosophy of the NPM? Basic impact, as said by the Gordon Truckler, James Murray, and Patrick Dunbar, assumed prominence. Their prepositions to the reduction of government and sector and restrictions to the provisions of the bare minimum function. This gave a theoretical foundations to the bureaucrat bashing, reduction of government activities, and designing market-based public policies. That is the basic impact of the new rights philosophy. Now, under new right philosophy, which was impacted by NPM, first came the public choice approach. We have already gone through it in detail in the block 4 also, and here also we have just gone through. The public choice theorists make the assumption that individuals who could be voters, politicians, bureaucrats, lobbyists are guided by self-interest. That is the public choice approach. Second was the principal agent approach. The principal agent approach attempts to understand the dynamics of the relationship between the principal and the employee, or what is called the agent. The agent is said not to act as the best interest of the principals, especially in the situations where employees has the advantage of possessing information and has diverse interest from the principal. This also, approach is also based on the premises that there are two persons involving in the provision of a service, that they are not equal on the standard of legal term. That is the principal agent approach. Two people are there, two basic what we can the relationship is there. That is the principal and the agents. The party who is engaging the other, it's called the principal, and the party that is getting engaged is called the agent. That is the principal agent approach. Now, these two are involved in provisions of a service but are not equal standing in the legal terms. That is the principal agent approach. Third is this transaction cost approach. Now, this application of transaction cost framework enables the government to minimize problem arising out of contracting. It helps in choosing the contractor, contract design, and specificationally determining the quality and quantity of the service. These models help in the assessing the efficiency of use of alternate institution arrangement, comprehending the inherent dilemma and interaction of involved in the contractual relationships, and balancing the efficiency and accountability aspects of contract. That is the transaction cost and approach. Then we have gone through the conceptual framework of NPA. The basic distinct characteristic of an NPA could be the completion or the complementing managerial along with the policy making skills. That is the to adopt private sector managerial practices by the public sector. Second characteristic was that it is the setting explicit measurement performance standards for public organizations, controlling the performance of public organization by predetermined output measures, contracting out private ownership and competitions in private service provisions. Further, we have done that the characteristics were making services more responsive to the needs of the customer and ensuring value for money. Using information technology, focusing on achieving results rather than primarily conforming with the processes. Other distinct characteristics was making public administration custom driven to enhance service ethic and efficiency, deregulating the government activities to make it result oriented, and empowering an employee to serve the customers as it promotes teamwork. Changing the overall public administration cultures towards flexibility and involving entrepreneurship, enterprising as opposed to rule bound process orientation and focusing on inputs rather than result. That is the basic conceptual framework of NPA. Reinventing government, the basic was the how they had reinvented the government. The transformation of governmental system received a new turn in 1992 with the propagations of the concept of reinventing government by David Osterman and Ted Gabler. These were the two who had really reinvented the government system. In their work, Reinventing Government, they had said that how the entrepreneur spirit is transforming the public sector. They made an elaborate case for transforming the bureaucratic government into an entrepreneurial one. The enterprise government that they prescribe is not much as concerned with what the government does, but how it does. They basically emphasize that government can not simply be like business because government and business serve different purposes. Both of them value and necessary are different. The question is how much government we have, but what kind of government we have. Hence, they made a case of government undergoing a change of reinventing self, in which they had gone or they reinvented the government form. Few models they had formed. The model they conceptualized has the following. That is the 10 models we have gone. The first was the catalytic government that provides the capitalist sector, that is action and solution of problem. So that was the catalytic government. Then was the community oriented government, that is the empowering of citizens in service delivery. Third was the competitive government, promoting competitions among various service providers. Fourth was the mission driven government, in which being driven by the mission, not rules and regulations. Fifth was the result oriented government, measuring their performance of organizations on the basis of their outcomes than on inputs. That was the result oriented government. Sixth was the custom driven government, in which defining clients as customer and offering them choice in service delivery. That was the model. Seventh was the enterprising government, that is mobilizing efforts towards earning money instead of just spending. That is the enterprising government. Eighth was the anticipatory government, that is sense of preventing problems before they emerge. That is the anticipatory government. Ninth was the decentralized government, in which sorting of decentralizing authority with a view of taking decision making close to the citizens. Tenth was the market oriented government, relying on the market mechanisms in the provision of service rather than bureaucratic mechanism. That was the 10 government which was done by the Obsin and Graveler, which considered that fundamental changes are necessary by crisis situations which require people with vision, leadership qualities, and support business, government as well as societal organizations. That was the 10 government reforms which was done by the Osborne and Gabler. Now, what was the impact we have gone through. I'll just go through quickly. The impact of NPM reforms. First was the clash of values between traditional and new public administration. There was a clash. There was contradictory nature of factors underlying reinventing government. Then the managerial predominance over policy capacities. There were reinforcement of politics and administration doctrine was there. Absence of clear-cut concepts of accountability and rendering citizens as customers. Also providing only managerial situations to policy reforms. We need to look beyond the new public management reforms in order to strive towards blending of economic and social value, involving and adapting a new administrative framework. It is necessary that each country examine its feasibility as per clearly formulated reforms objectives. Examine suitable prerequisite for reform and create a conducive atmosphere for its implementation. That is the NPA. Now we'll move further with the Unit 15 and our next approach, that is the good governance approach. In order to understand the concept of good governance, we must be clear about the wider concept of state, which encompasses the government and governments. Government is a major constituent of state as it is an instrument through which the state strives to accomplish its goals and objectives. The last 2 decades have witnessed far-reaching modifications in the state structure and dynamics. The impact of global forces on polity, economic, and administration has been phenomenal, with the state, societies, and issues concerning the divisions of responsibility within and beyond government undergoing a metamorphosis. The citizens are also becoming conscious of their rights and responsibilities. There is an increase in the level of their expectations. As a result, the need for good government has become crucial. In this unit, we shall discuss the concept of state government and the changing nature of task of government, which has led to the changing nature of governing to government. Form of government to governance. A state is a political institution that has sovereign jurisdiction within defined territorial borders and exercise authority through a set of permanent institutions, including parliament, judiciary, bureaucrats, and so on. The government, as we have discussed, has been interested with wide range functioning. Over time, however, the activities of government have expanded to such an extent that certain problems have emerged, with including mounting and fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit, wasteful expenditure in state-owned enterprises, decrease in revenue, and so on are the basic problems. These developments have led to the thinking that government should move away from the direct provisions of services and allow private sectors to enter and enchant areas. Another important development that we can witness is the onslaught of the globalization phenomenon. The present day economics and the undergoing a significant transformation and the boundaries across nations are disappearing, leading to the excessive interconnection risk. The role of the state in core areas, big questions due to the failure of government in taking some priorities areas. Hence, this has resulted in government, which has all along been the major provider of services to within to withdraw from certain areas, enabling the private sector as well as people initiatives in the form of civil society organizations to expand their areas of operations. The practice of public administration, which has been dominated by the government, is giving way to a networking between government, market, and collective groups of people, commonly referred to as civil society. The present concept of governance looks at government interacting with various segments of society and economy to arrive at mutual acceptable decisions. We shall discuss the concept, significance, and future of governance in the further. First is the governance, concept and feature. What is the government? The term government, technically speaking, has been derived from the Greek word "kever," which means a steer or to pilot or to be at the helm of the things. It was first used by Harlan Cleveland in mid 1970s when he said, "What the people want is less government and more governance." There are international organizations such as World Bank, International Monetary Fund, etc., which are involved in providing finance assistance for fostering development, especially in developing countries. Then, in the second generation reforms in the form of governance, over the course of time, it was observed by the international organization that the market oriented reforms introduced did not yield the desired result, and the growth in many of the countries became slower than was originally anticipated. The bank hence for the first time emphasized the need to give importance to governance. According to their interpretations, governance has four main components. That is, first is the public sector management, second is the accountability, third is the legal frame of government, and four is the transparency and information accessibility. Accord- These are the four main components of governance. Again, I am repeating it. First is the public sector management, second is the accountability, third is the legal framework for development, and fourth is the transparency and information accessibility. Governance depends upon the three pillars of constitutions, namely the executive, legislature, and judiciary. The legislature formulates the law, the executive implements the law, and the judiciary interprets the law. Governance basically attempts to promote collaborations working together by the government, markets, and people. It aims at maximum good for the maximum number of people, which cannot be achieved only by the government, but also other public as well as private organizations and even civil society organizations. Let us now discuss the concept of key characteristics of good governance. The basic key characteristics of good government. The World Bank consider good governance as an epidemics by predictable, open, and enlightened policy making, bureaucracy imbued with the professional theory, acting in furtherance of the public good, the rule of law, transparent processes, and a strong civil society participating in public affairs. Participation underlines the need for good governance, which is necessary for some economic, human, and institutional development. The promotion of this requires efforts on the part of the citizen also. Four key dimensions of governments were emphasized. These are first is the public sector management. I have already we have gone through. Second, accountability, legal framework for development and information and transparency. The World Bank also outlines certain basics of good governance. These include the operation of rule of law that involve adequate laws to ensure personal security and facilitate the functioning of market, which was adequately enforced through an independent and predictable judiciary and the absence of official corruption. The policy environment which facilitate economic growth and poverty reduction. This includes sound macroeconomic and fiscal policies, budgetary institutions, and predictable and efficient regulations of the private sector, including the financial sector. Adequate investment in people involving good evolution of public expenditures between and within sector, protecting the vulnerable to affordable and transaction on target safe nuts and general ensuring an appropriate poor emphasis in public expenditures. Protecting the environment by assuring that economic growth does not cause environmental degradations to conceptualizations, good governance and constitute its basic characteristics. The basic characteristics of the good government is the first is the participation, rule of law, transparency, responsiveness, equity, effectiveness and efficiency, accountability, predictability. Now we'll just explain. First characteristic that is the participation. This is considered to be the core of good governance. Government needs to ensure the requisite freedom of the citizens to participate in this decision-making processes, articulate and represent their interests, and that can affect in the policies and programs. That is the actual participation of the good governance. Second is the rule of law. Governance does not imply arbitrary use of authority. Any governance to be efficient needs to be supplemented by a fair legal framework. That is the rule of law should be there. Third is the transparency for good governance. Transparency should be there. This is based on the premises of free flow of information and its accessibility to those affected by the decision which are taken in the governance processes. Third is the responsiveness. Fourth is the responsiveness. Presently, the emphasis is more on the institutions being responsive to the needs of all those who are likely to be affected by their decision. That the good governance should be responsible of whatever act they do. Then the equity. The fifth characteristic is the equity. Since the governance structure and mechanism aid at the participation, they need to promote equity. A sleeping well-being and developed depends on ensuring that all members have seat and role in it and are not excluded from the mainstream of activities. That is the equity. Now, next is the effectiveness and efficiency. Good governance, also similar to new public management, aims at effectiveness and efficiency in usage of resources in consonance with the societal need and demands. Then the good government should be accountability. It involves making the politicians, administrator, other government, non-government organizations, and private sector they are accountable for their activities. Then the predictability. This entails the presence of clear-cut laws and regulations that regulate the society and economy. Bedford and Loafer 2003 bring out 10 characteristics of good governance. One is the citizen engagement, second is the transparency, third, accountability, fourth, the equality agenda of social inclusion, fifth, the ethnic and honest behavior, sixth, equity, that is fair procedure and due processes, seventh is the ability to complete in a global environment, eighth is the ability to work efficiently in a partnership, ninth, sustainability, and tenth, respect for rule of law. These 10 characteristics were by the Beverwood and Loafer in 2003. Now, what is the aim of good government? Good governance aims at first improving the quality of life of citizens, enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of administrator, establishing the legitimacy and credibility of using information technology based services to improve citizen government interference, improving, enhancing the productivity of employees, promoting organizational pluralism, state, market, and civil society organizations for the governments. Good government aims at achieving much more than efficient management of economic and financial resources or public services. It is broad reform strategies to make government more open, responsible, accountable, and democratic regulations, private sector, and strengthen institutions of civil society. This is the basic aim of good governance. Beyond good governance, the emergence of the concept of good governance and have triggered several debates and discussions. Ongoing process involving multiple actors and institutions. It also calls for radical transformation of the mindset in taking appropriate measures in bringing and sustaining institutional reforms. Hence, it is gigantic that calls for replacing as well as revitalizing, exercising, and existing institutional processes and mechanisms. Good governance, good government would, for good governance, issues and challenges were there. What were the issues and challenges that came to us? We'll just go through. Governance and good governance, as we have discussed, occupy an important place in the current scenario. The important changes or challenges facing the governance process is to build a framework or system that can promote an appropriate balance between these three constituents. Good governance is an ongoing process that has to be sustained, but it is gigantic task which involves a multi-pronged strategies. The important issues and challenges pertaining to good governance includes first challenge is the strengthening the institutions of governance. Now, Parliament is the supreme representative institutions in India. The political representative represents the electorate. Hence, there is a need to develop good practices and procedures of parliamentary functioning and make Parliament a dynamic institution in tune with the changing times. This is the first challenge. Next is the improving the functioning of civil service and bureaucracy. Alternatively, it is the permanent executive that is on one table for policy implementation. It is necessary to develop a responsive civil service that is professional, energetic, and caters to people's need. That is the two for improving the functioning of civil service and bureaucracy. Next is the re-ensuring the citizens and establishing an independent accountability judiciary. The judiciary is to be seen as an effective instrument of maintenance of rule of law and upholding of social justice. Making the private sector accountable, this can be done through adopting sound business practices, adhering to rules and regulations, and protecting the interest of customers. Now, educating the citizens about their rights and obligations that can be ensured by making their partners in all developmental activities. Economic government needs to be given importance. This can be ensured through efficiency budgetary allocations to social sectors priorities areas such as education, health, housing, appropriate taxations, and subsidiary system. Good government has to pay attention to several key issues in political, economic, and civil sphere. Political government needs to be strengthened through ensuring appropriate decentralization measures, making elected representative responsive and accountable to citizens, strengthening their capacities through education, awareness, and training, conduct of regular periodic and fair elections, impartial judiciary, and improving the functioning of civil services. Civil governance includes harnessing of the self-initiatives of people. Its focuses should be on improving the capacities of govern their lives, creating awareness in them, and enabling them to take up activities, roles in democratic governance processes. The issues and challenges that confront good governments requires effective functioning of three wings of government, namely executive, legislature, and judiciary, and building appropriate linkage amongst the organs. Government has to strike a suitable balance between parliamentary supremacy and judicial independence. And the state, private sector, and civil society have an important role in governance processes. There is a need to assign clear-cut roles and responsibilities to these components to enable them to work towards genuine people-oriented developmental activities. Governments is a model as well as a process involving multiple stakeholders, institutions, and interactions between them. Good governance focuses on making the process smooth with sound policy framework, efficiency, accountability, and transparency in all activities promoting sound social, political, economic, and strike governance. It is a continuous process through which conflictual and diverse interests are accommodated, cooperative actions is fostered, and formal and informal institutions, but in power to promote public good. In India, the formulation of citizen character, redressal of public grievances, right to information, people's participation, and so on are initiative in this direction. The issues and challenges we have gone through was the to confirm and confirm government good governance. We quickly go through the good governance approach. Uh, in good governance approach, that is to understand the concept of good governance, we must clearly clear about the wide concept of state, which encompasses government and governments. That is, government is a major constituent of state, as it is an instrument through which the state strives to accomplish its goals and objectives is the governance. From government to governance, the state is a political institution that has sovereignty, judicial dictions within which definition and territorial borders are exercised, authority through a set of government institutions, including parliament and judiciary, bureaucracy, and so on. The government, as we have discussed, has been impressed with the wide range functions. Over time, however, the activities of government have expanded to such an extent that certain problems have emerged, which include mounting fiscal deficit, wasteful expenditure in state owned enterprises, a decreasing in revenue, and so on. This development has led to the thinking that the government should move away from the direct provision of services and allow private sectors to enter the uncharted areas. The present day economies and the undergoing a significant transformation and the boundaries across nations are disappearing, leading to excessive interconnectedness. Hence, this has resulted in government, which has all along been the major provider of services. To withdraw from certain areas, enabling private sector as well as people initiatives in the form of civil society organization to expand their areas of operation. The practice of public administration, which has been dominated by the government, is giving way to a networking between government, market, and collective group of peoples, commonly referred as civil society. The present concepts of governance looks at government interacting with various segments of society and economy to arrive at mutually acceptable decisions. This is the how we shifted from government to government. The concept, the basic concept and features of government, we have already discussed it. I'll just go through. The ban, according to the interpretations, governance has four main components. First is the public sector management. Second is the accountability. Third, legal framework of development. Fourth is the transparency and information accessibility. Governance depends upon the three pillars of the constitutions, namely the executive, legislature, and judiciary. The legislature formulates the law, the executive implements the law, while the judiciary interprets the law. The characteristics of good governance we have already gone through. First characteristic is that the should have policy environment which facilitates economic growth and poverty reduction. This includes the sound microeconomic and fiscal policies, budgetary institutions, and predictable and efficient regulation of the private sector, including the financial sector. Second characteristics of good governance would be it should have adequate investment in people involving good evolutions of public expenditure between and within the sector, protecting the vulnerable to affordable and transaction or targeted safe three nuts in generally ensuring an appropriate emphasis in public expenditures protecting the environment by ensuring that economic growth does not cause environmental degradation, to conceptualize good governance and postulate its basic characteristics. Now, the basic characteristics of good governance is the uh, participation, rule of law, transparency, responsiveness, equity, effectiveness and efficiency, accountability, predictability. These are the basic characteristics of good governance. Now in 2003, and that is Boybrand and Lofer, which bring about 10 characteristics of good governance. These what basic characteristics are one 8 characteristics were there. That is participation, rule of law, transparency, responsiveness, equity, effectiveness and efficiency, accountability and predictability. These are the 8 characteristics of a good governance. In 2003, Bevrod and Lofer bring out 10 characteristics of good governance. That were first was the citizens engagement, second was the transparency, third was the accountability, fourth was the equality agenda and social inclusion, fifth was the ethical and honest behavior, sixth was equity, that is fair procedure and due processes, seventh was the ability to compete in the global environment, eighth, the ability to work efficiently in a partnership, ninth was the sustainability, and 10th, respect for rule of law. That these were the 10 characteristics of good governance that was uh, characterized by Railroad and Lofer in 2003. Now, what the good government aims at improving the quality of life of the citizen, enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of administrations, and promoting organization, pluralism, state, market, and civil society organization for governance. Good government aims at achieving much more than efficient management of economic and financial resources or public services. It is a broad reform strategies to make government more open, responsible, accountable, and democratically regulated private sector and strengthen the institutions of civil society. Then further we had studied that what were these basic issues and challenges that came across. The issues and challenges that confronted good governance requires effective functioning of three wings of government, namely executive, legislature, and judiciary, and building appropriate linkage amongst the organs. Governance has strike a sustainable or suitable balance between parliamentary supremacy and judiciary independence, and the state, private sector, and civil society have an important role in governance processing. There is a need to assess clear-cut role and responsibilities of these components to enable them to work towards general people-oriented developmental activities. Governance is a model as well as a process involving multiple stakeholders, institutions, interactions between them. Good governance focuses on making the process smooth with sound policy framework, efficiency, accountability, and transparency in all activities, promoting sound social, political, economic, and strikes government. It is a continuous process through which conflictual and diverse interests are accommodated. Cooperative sectors and actions is fostered and formal and informal institutions, but in power to promote public good in India, the formulation of citizen character charters, redressal of public grievances, right to information, people participation, and so on are initiated in this direction. Now we have gone through in two approaches, that is the new public management approach and second is the good governance approach in block 5. Further in our next class we'll further study the postmodern approach and the feminist approach. These two approaches are there in block 5. We'll discuss it and we'll study these two approaches in our next class.